says it's connected. Keep getting an error message either shortly after it starts or somewhere through the thing. But anyways, hopefully I've rebooted. Hopefully it'll be okay. I hope everybody had a good afternoon. Mine was uneventful. Tonight I thought we would look to 2 Timothy chapter 2 verses 14 through 18. And over there in Paul's second letter to Timothy, he says, "Remind them of these things, charging them before the Lord not to strive about words to no profit, to the ruins of the hearers. Be diligent to present yourselves approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane and idle babblings, for they will increase to more ungodliness, and their message will spread like cancer." Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort, who have strayed concerning the truth, saying that the resurrection is already past, and they overflow the faith of some. And so we want to look at this there, this idea of verse 17, and their message will spread like a cancer. He's giving warning. And up in the preceding verses, he's talking about signs, if you will, or things that lead to spiritual cancer. So that's what we're going to look about here tonight. The American Cancer Society stresses early detection. Early detection is one of the best weapons against things. It provides a list of early warning signs, and for people to be aware and cognitive of those, and encourages frequent self-examinations and screenings and checkups, if you will. Being preemptive is the key to keeping cancer under control, if you will. The Bible stresses early detection of spiritual illness as well. Get it before it gets a hold of you. We see that in James 1, 14 through 15. And we see that we need to get it before it gets beyond curing, as in 1 Timothy 4, 2 and 2 Peter 2 and 14. So we're going to look at some early warning signs of spiritual cancer, if you will, this evening. The first sign that I want to look at is the danger signs of authority. People who have issues with authority, if you will. So these are danger signs relating to authority. If we find ourselves resenting Bible, we might have a cancer, if you will, a spiritual cancer starting to brew. In other words, we don't like what the commandments of God tells us to do. We don't see the sense in them, and therefore we don't want to obey them. So when a little bit of that illness creeps into the heart, pretty soon, the Bible talks about, the hardening of the heart, or that once you've seared the conscience, that it's easy to do it over and over and over again, and pretty soon the conscience becomes numb to it. So same thing when it comes to biblical restrictions and requirements. The first time, leading up to, it probably weighs on your mind greatly. Should I do this? The Lord wouldn't have me to do this. But then often we find ourselves breaking that and developing a new habit, if you will. And pretty soon it doesn't bother the conscience. It becomes automatic. If you find yourself justifying views and actions by something other than Bible authority. How many times have we heard people say, well, Paul was a male chauvinist. He doesn't know what he was talking about. Therefore, what he prescribed is outdated. In other words, they just talk down the authority, and they try to justify their actions as because the things in the Bible were outdated. Or the Bible's just a guide. They come up with all kinds of justification to circumvent the Bible, if you will. So if that's what we find ourselves doing, then maybe we have a Bible authority cancer starting within us. What good and beloved people, what good and beloved people think about it. And I have here, consider 1 Corinthians 2, 4 through 5, where it says, and my speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words or human wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith should not be in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. So we don't want to rely on the wisdom of men. In other words, again, we want to rely upon the authority and the power of the Scriptures. Perhaps what one feels about it, rather than rational conclusions based upon biblical information. In other words, again, when it comes to life issues, are we given is the litmus test, what feels good, or is the litmus test that we're giving, what does the Scripture say? What has God commanded? Do you go to the Lord in prayer? Do you search the Scriptures to see an example of what you're battling there? The proverb writer says in Proverbs 14 verse 12, says, there is a way that seems right to man, and we can come up with all kinds of ways to justify, but it ends in a way of death, because there's only one right way, and that's the way of the Lord. And then perhaps what is popularly accepted or predominantly endorsed. And we see this, the debate over evolution versus creation. And there are some denominations who try to hybridize, if you will, those beliefs, where they say, well, one day during Genesis was 1,000 years, or it could have been millions of years, because time to God is nothing. But the Scriptures, Moses wrote Genesis, and Moses, clearly says that the world was created in one day, and he defines what one day is. One day is a 24 lunar. Well, no, the lunar cycle will be 30 days. I'm sorry. A rise of the sun and a rise the next day. That is, a 24-hour period is what is defined as a day. So we don't, So again, if we have authority with danger signs relating to authority, is do we reject the restrictions of the Bible? Do we try to justify things, for our own actions versus what the Bible says? And then, do we think about what good and beloved people think about? In other words, people that we people that we maybe look up to, what they feel about it, or do we try to rationalize things based upon faulty feelings, or do we try to go with popularity in the world? Either way, it's a rejection of the authority of the Scriptures. Next, another danger sign that we could see spiritual cancer starting is danger signs relating to that of people. Danger signs relating to that of people. In other words, we find it harder and harder to resist peer pressure. Perhaps, we understand what the Bible says. We accept what the Bible says, but when we get in a crowd of people that are outside the church, we want to be accepted by that group, and we end up caving and going in with that Bible, with those. Consider Matthew chapter 14 and verse 9. It says, and the king was sorry, nevertheless, because of the oaths and because of those who sat with them, he commanded it to be given to her, i.e., he gave in the peer pressure because those who sat with him. He didn't want to look disfavorable amongst that peer group that he was with. And so do we find that could be a sign of spiritual cancer for us if we're hanging around with the wrong crowd, if we're hanging around with the wrong type of people that are getting us to do things that aren't aren't what Christians ought to be doing. Or perhaps we find ourselves feeling more and more neglected by our brethren. Consider Matthew 20 and verse 28 says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Are we serving others, or do we expect to be served? Where do we find ourselves? If we feel strained our relationships with our brethren, are we going to them and we trying to work those things out, or are we just allowing ourselves to become more frustrated, if you will, when it comes to anger? If it isn't dealt with properly, it becomes resentment, and anything beyond anger becomes a sin. And so, are we dealing with those things rightfully? Do you find yourself constantly being critical of the church and those who are, again, the church is the members, perhaps looking for excuses to quit? Well, did you see how brother so and so looked at me? I can't believe you. Well, that type of thing. Are you becoming hypersensitive to the way that some behave, looking for just a way? Just looking for an excuse to either start something or to vacate. And I've seen that many a times. Like I say, sometimes it seemed like the church was a revolving door down there. There was a revolving door, if you will, at the church down there. And of course, that's kind of expected around a large Air Force base where you have a lot of people coming in and out. But you can often see people that profess to be devout Christians, but they start picking. They start finding fault with little things, and they start raising questions, and start arguing over things that mean nothing in the scriptures. And then pretty soon they're going, oh, we're offended, we're going to go somewhere else. That type of thing. And instead of just going, maybe that congregation isn't a good fit. Sometimes there are personality conflicts, and I guess that's okay. We would hope that there wouldn't be, but you don't have to look for an excuse to quit. Find another congregation. But people, that's not how people handle things. Perhaps we find ourselves more concerned with personal rights than our feelings for our brethren. And I've seen that over and over and over and over and over. I'm scripturally right. Or someone is scripturally ignorant, and then you want to browbeat them to death to prove that you're right. I think either way, everything should be done in love and kindness, if you will. And we should never want to prove ourselves to be right, just to prove ourselves to be right, that type of thing. And we certainly don't want to become a stumbling block for those. And like in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, the issue was with what kind of meat were they to eat. The Gentile converts realized that meat was meat. They could go wherever, but it was those who came out of Judaism that still struggled with eating strangled meat or questioned the meat, where the meat came from in the market. And so, that caused all kinds of hard feelings towards brethren, if you will, with the way that they were handling it and the bickering and the fighting, and you can just imagine the constant backbiting, if you will, that was going on. And that's what Paul was addressing in that situation. So we don't want, cancer within spiritual cancer within the congregation can be people concentric, and we want to ensure that we are looking for those danger signs, if you will. Am I looking for excuses to argue with the congregation, or Am I becoming hypersensitive to what some brethren are doing, or et cetera, et cetera? If that's the case, maybe you have a people problem. The next one I want to look at is danger signs relating to that of preference. Danger signs relating to preferences, if you will. Perhaps we prefer the constant company of worldly minded people versus those who are spiritually minded. And that's nothing new. You know, like I say, I think that, you know, in a lot of congregations, there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, they attend church, but they're only Christian like when they're here at the building. Once they leave the building and go back to their home, they're of the world. You know, where's your preference? Would you rather be with your fellow brethren, be with brethren talking about spiritual things, or would you rather be hanging out with the guys from work? You know, what is the case? Or perhaps you prefer secular activities over spiritual exercises. Perhaps I enjoy going to the game versus going to Bible study. Or perhaps, you know, I prefer to be at work than to go to Sunday service. Whatever that case may be. We could come up with all types of hypotheticals. But where does your heart prefer to be? Does your heart prefer to be in some type of activity? Or do you long and look for your opportunity to come and be with the brethren and to study the scriptures? The only real joy comes from non-spiritual activities. Or I should say, you know, that no real joy comes from non-spiritual activities. Any spiritual exercise, you know, or I should say, these are people who prefer secular activities. Any spiritual exercise becomes a burden. Oh, we got. They're going to have another gospel meeting this month. Oh, I'm so dreading that. And I've been guilty of that. That's probably not the right attitude, is it? But I think we've probably all been there. I think that's a level of spiritual maturity, if you will. Or, oh no, it's Wednesday night Bible study. I don't want, you know, I really don't want to go tonight. There's something on TV that I want to see, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could come up with all kinds of hypotheticals. So that would be danger, spiritual cancer relating to preferences. In other words, am I preferring something that is secularized or something that is materialism before those things that are spiritual? If so, then maybe I have some issues with the preferences in my life. Next, I want to look at some danger signs relating to that of time. Perhaps we find it harder and harder to find time for spiritual exercise. I like to study my Bible, but I don't seem to have any time to do it. Well, why not? You know, and this could be publicly and privately. I don't have time to go to church. I don't have time to go to services, or I don't have time to pray evenings, or I'm too tired to open up the Bible. We come up with all kinds of excuses. Well, I got really involved in this movie, and I just forgot that I needed to study the scriptures. Whatever that case may be. You know, perhaps we find more and more of our time consumed by the affairs of our life. Consider what Paul wrote over there in 2 Timothy 2:4. It says, "No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier." In other words, you know, when you're in warfare, your mind needs to be set on warfare. If not, you're going to get yourself killed. And nobody ever wanted a soldier that didn't have his mind in the game, did they? I mean, that soldier was just going to be killed immediately on the field. What good's a dead soldier do anything? No good. Same thing when it comes to our service and our spiritual warfare. Satan hopes that you don't have time for your spirituality. That's what he's banking on. He's hoping that you'll be consumed with the TV or with extracurricular activities or whatever it might be. That's a win for him. Certainly a win. Innocent pleasures of this life, they can become burdensome, if you will, because they take a precedence over God. They may be in it. There's nothing wrong with going to a ball game. There's nothing wrong with watching sports. There's nothing wrong in going to activities of your children or your grandchildren. Whatever. There's nothing wrong with fishing. Until it becomes a priority that replaces God, or that priority or that pleasure, if you will, becomes more important to you in your heart than that of God. That's when it becomes a problem. And that's when that spiritual cancer begins to manifest itself. And in some of our preceding slides, that's when we start to have preference issues. We start hanging out with the wrong people. It starts to just cascade, and it gets bigger, and then it metastasizes. And next thing you know, you find yourself falling away from the church. Well, what happened? Even the necessities of life can be a sign of a lack of faith. Letting the job become your number one priority, if you will. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 30 says, "Now God so clothes the grass of the fields, which is today, tomorrow is thrown into the oven. Will he not do much more to clothe you, O ye of little faith?" Why be concerned about what's going on today? Matthew chapter 6 verse 33. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Is that your number one priority in life? It should be. If it's not, then perhaps you got a little bit of a spiritual cancer going on. Perhaps you find yourselves wanting to rush through services to get on to something else. Oh, I can't wait. Is Jim going to shut up? How much longer is Jim going to be preaching? How much longer is this prayer going to last? Why did they pick a song with 4 stanzas? That type of thing. We've probably all been there as well. I can remember a little kid. How much longer? Or you walk in and you see somebody that is known to go for long periods of time. Like, oh no, I'm not going to get home in time to play with my friends. That type of thing. These are just danger signs relating to that of time. Again, I think these are good questions. Rhetorical questions that we need to ask ourselves and be honest with ourselves. Next, I want to look at danger signs relating to conscience, the conscience, if you will. We know from the scriptures to defile the conscience or to go against the conscience is a sin unto you, right? So do you find yourself constantly arguing with your conscience? Do you find yourself debating? Well, can I do this? I really want to do this, but, well, maybe I shouldn't. There's probably nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't feel right. But then, if there's nothing wrong with it, why don't I just go ahead and do it? Whatever that case may be. You know, if you're having, if you're debating things to yourself inside your mind, and often it's a debate trying to justify what it is that's going to that you want to take place. You're talking to yourself into doubtful practices, if you will. You're trying to convince yourself, to create that doubt, In Romans chapter 14, verse 23, it says, "But he whom doubts is condemned if he eats, but he does not eat from faith, for whatever is from faith is not from faith is sin." Again, speaking of, what we there in 1 Corinthians 8, the meat of idols. Again, it was a sin to the Jews because it bothered their conscience to eat those things. And that's what he was acknowledging. He does not eat from faith, or whatever is not from faith is sin. So it's a sin to go against our conscience. Are we talking? Do you talk to yourself out of known duties, duties of a Christian? Being a good Samaritan, helping somebody who's in need. Well, I'd like to pull over and help them, but I don't have time. Well, I don't want to get involved. That could be a trap. It could be a booby trap. There's probably somebody around the corner lurking, just waiting to pounce me. So I'm not. We can come up with all kinds of excuses to not do the right thing. Versus, just saying, this is what the Lord would have me to do, and whatever happens, it happens. I'm going to leave it in the hands of the Lord. But I'm going to be the good Samaritan today. Or we find ourselves constantly on the defensive. Again, that hypercriticalness. Where were you at last night? What do you mean, where was I at? What business is that? That type of thing. I was just trying to have small talk with you. Wasn't insinuating anything. That type of thing. Often we see that with spouses, or whatnot. Where have you been? Just inquiring. People get all upset, and whatever that case may be. Is that what you find? You find yourself that being defensive with your brother? Again, these can all be signs or danger signs to spiritual cancer related to the conscience. And lastly, I think this is the last one tonight, and that's danger signs of sin. This is probably the one that we should understand the most, if you will. But it's probably the one that we commit the most as well. Are we comfortable with the sin in others? In other words, are we comfortable with people who are committing sin, or that we believe to be committing? Are we not confronting our brother? 2 Peter 2:8 says, "For that righteous men dwelling among you torment his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds." Well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, so I'm not going to say anything. Yeah, I probably should point it out to him, but I think he already knows, so we'll just let it be. Whatever that case may be. Perhaps we minimize the seriousness of sin as too. Well, it's just a little white lie. I don't want to hurt her feelings, so I just won't tell all the truth. Well, we see where that got Abraham, didn't it? He told a half truth. Or we go, well, after all, we all sin and we all fall short of God. We should never justify sin. Never should justify it. Never. Or we start comparing our own sins favorably with that of others. Well, yeah, I got some skeletons in my closet, but they're nothing compared to his. Again, that's not going to. I don't think that litmus test is going to stand on the day of judgment. Well, Lord, but did you see brother so and so what he did? I wasn't nothing like that. Yeah, both of you can go over there. Got to be, it's I got it. I understand. It's hard. It's uncomfortable, and it ought to be uncomfortable. If you're comfortable with confronting people like that, you probably don't have a conscience. And it should bother us, but if we had the right love for our fellow brethren, or we had the right love for God, then that love should compel us to do what is right in His eyes, should it not? If it doesn't, then we have misplaced love. Your love is either greater for yourself than for the Lord, or greater for the world, or whatever that might be. But whenever we fail to do what the Lord has told us to do, if we don't do it, then I guarantee you, at some point in that there's misplaced love, if you will. I guarantee you. Or perhaps we find being more critical of effort to correct sin than the sinner. More critical of efforts to correct sin than the sinner. Just as an example, down there in Georgia, some of the brethren like to send letters to let people know, hey, you've been missing a lot of we've been missing you, or whatever that case may be. And there was usually one or two naysayers that start going, well, there's nothing good is going to come of that letter. I wouldn't even send it, whatever. Well, we probably ought to say something to brother Tim, I guess, hypothetically, about whatever behavior. Well, I don't think that, it'll probably drive him away. You start coming up with all kinds of excuses for not administering the corrective action. I guarantee you, some of those people that Paul talked about, that fell away from the church, they were probably offended by what he said to them. I guarantee you. It's just human nature. But that didn't stop him from doing it, did it? No. He viewed it as his duty to do so. And that's the way I think we should look at it too. It's simply our duty. And for those that are Christians, don't get offended when somebody points something out to you. They're just simply doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I understand we're in the fallen world, and we usually when somebody points something out that we've been doing, first thing we do is get offended. And when we get offended, we get defensive. And when we get defensive, we get mad, we start arguing, we start raising our voice. Yeah, it's human behavior. I got it. I understand. But we can also temper the mind to realize, hey, if somebody does say to me, don't overreact. And that can be done. Trust me, I come from a military environment where you had to control your emotions all the time. So it can be done. So spiritual cancer is a very serious thing. It's something that has plagued many congregations down through the ages, and it's something that continues to plague congregations yet today. And we really need to be watchful of those signs, if you will. Early detection, again, is the best thing. Get it before it metastasizes. Get it before it spreads and takes over all the members. These I put up here. These examples may not mean apostasy as a certainty in every case, and that's not what we're saying. Oh, the church is falling apart. No, that's not what we're saying. We're we're just saying, it could lead to that, but it certainly may not. But however, we would do well to watch lest that we would develop to that point, if you will. And then that's the whole thing of why the American Cancer Society is all about that self-examination and early detection. And that's why they want you, as you get older, go and have these tests done, because you're at and spiritual cancer overtook them and led to the downfall of Israel. So we don't want to be we don't want to be like the Israelites of old, is what I'm trying to say. So we need to look for the signs of spiritual cancer in our congregation, in the Lord's church, universal, wherever, and try to ensure that it doesn't happen on our watch. So now we want to extend the invitation.